Hi, I'm Sharon from Little River Kitchen and I'm going to show you how easy it is to make this salted butterscotch sauce using just 4 ingredients. This butterscotch sauce is really easy to make, but before we start, just make sure that you use a heavy based pot that isn't non-stick, and that's because those non-stick surfaces aren't designed to withhold really high temperatures and it can affect the non-stick surface. So if you have a stainless steel pot, definitely use that and make sure it's a heavy based pot as well. So first of all, what we want to do is add our sugar to the pot. And also our butter goes in at the same time. You don't need a thermometer for this, which is good. It's nice and easy. And then we're going to add our cream. This is thickened cream, or you can use pure cream, but make sure you use full fat. So what we want to do now is put this on a medium to low heat, and then we're going to cook this on that temperature for around about 5 minutes till everything's melted, and then we can increase the temperature. So just mix it all through to start with. Just dissolve that brown sugar in the cream. And a rubber spatula is great because you can really feel what's going on the bottom of the pan. So if it starts to sizzle, just turn it down slightly. We're just looking to melt the mixture at this stage. And because there's a lot of sugar in this, as it melts and starts to heat up, it starts to take on its own heat. So you will need to reduce that temperature slightly. If you're making this on an electric stove top, then you may need to switch to a different element that hasn't heated up so much, or just lift it off the heat to cool that base of that pot down. So make sure you keep scraping the bottom because it will get quite hot down there and you want to make sure it doesn't burn. You'll feel it with your rubber spatula if it's starting to catch. Now it's starting to fizz up now, so I'm going to turn this down even further. Now let this cook for another few more minutes until when I lift my spatula out of the mixture, I can't see any grains of sugar. So at the moment, when I first put it on my spatula, it's a bit fizzy, but once those bubbles disappear, I can see there's still granules of sugar in there. I want to keep going at this stage until there is no more sugar granules visible. Whatever you do, don't test this with your finger because you'll burn yourself. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but you can actually see little granules of sugar still on the spatula. I've got this on the lowest heat and you can see how that sugar's really made this mixture hot. It's still fizzing, but it's on the lowest possible heat. It's very important to be wary that when you're working with sugar, it gets extraordinarily hot. And a good way to test if you're not sure is just to get a little bowl and just let it sit there for maybe 30 seconds or so, and then you can feel it with your fingers and see if there's any sugar granules left in there. If you don't make sure that all of those sugar granules are dissolved, then you'll end up with a grainy butterscotch sauce, and we don't want to boil it until we're sure that all that sugar has actually dissolved. So now that's cooled enough for me to test with my fingers. I'm just going to test it between my fingers and there's no sugar granules left in there. So now it's ready for us to turn the temperature up to a point where you can see that mixture has got bubbles over the surface. But just remember, the hotter it gets, the more you turn the temperature down because it can fizz up really easily. So set your timer for around 3 minutes. So what we're looking for now is for this to thicken before we take it off the heat. Keep the temperature so that the pot has got this rolling type of bubbling across the surface. Make sure you run your spatula over intermittently. So we're also going to add some vanilla to this, but we don't want to add it now because it'll cook out the flavour. We want to add it at the end. And I'm also going to add some flaky sea salt. I love flaky sea salt because it's not as harsh as table salt, but adding some salt to this sauce is going to give it that really beautiful complexity to the flavour. It just takes it to another level. If it's just butterscotch sauce on its own, it's still lovely, but it's overly sweet. So adding that salt really helps to balance things out, and it also just gives you that lovely salty sweet flavour combo. So we're also going to add this at the end as well because I want to have those pops of salt in amongst the sauce. If you don't have flaky sea salt, you can use table salt, but add it right at the end and just do it to taste, and I'll show you how to do that once we're done. So as I'm stirring this now, it's starting to darken in colour, but I can also feel it catching on the bottom of the pot a little bit, which is fine, but it just means you have to keep on stirring to make sure it doesn't burn. So we need to boil this to thicken it up. That's why we need to keep this going. And this sauce will also thicken once it cools. So we're not looking for it to be completely thick in the pot. We're looking for it to thicken up slightly and not be as runny as when we first started. If your pot starts to turn really dark golden brown, then take it off the heat straight away and just keep stirring. It means that the bottom is cooking really fast. And as I said, that hot sugar keeps on cooking even though we've taken it off the heat. So you'll notice even if it's just starting to get a little bit golden, if you take it off the heat and keep stirring, it'll continue to get deeper in colour because you can see it's not even on the heat and it's still boiling up there. So this changes to a much thicker consistency in the fridge. I'm going to turn the heat off now and I'm just going to keep stirring. You can see it's changed in colour, it's gotten deeper in colour and running off the spoon slower than it was when I first started. And it's been around 3 minutes at that constant bubbling phase, so that's ready. So now the trick with your butterscotch sauce is to wait for it to reach room temperature before you put it in a jar and pop it in the fridge. If you pop it in the fridge while it's still warm, it can turn grainy. So you can see now that the bubbling has stopped. It's thickened up a lot, and that's exactly what we're looking for. So at this stage, I've taken it off the heat. It's cooled down slightly. I'm going to add my vanilla now. You can add other things if you like liqueurs, amaretto, whatever takes your fancy. So once that's cooled down to room temperature, that's when I'm going to add my salt. So I'm going to add a teaspoon of flaky sea salt to this once it's cooled down a little bit. But if you're using table salt, I would wait until it's cooled right down and then I would add probably a pinch and then mix it through, then have a taste and see what you think. Granulated sea salt is a lot stronger than your flaky sea salt. So definitely don't use a teaspoon of granulated sea salt. I'm using flaked sea salt, which means it's not ground down as much. So in essence, it's not as much salt as if I were to add the granulated sea salt. So you can see just even after a minute of cooling, it's thickening up even more. And once we put that in the fridge, that will thicken up even more to the point where you may need to heat it gently before you use it. Okay, so it's been about an hour since I turned this off the heat and I've just let it sit at room temperature and you can see how thick that sauce has become. So make sure that you don't go too crazy when you're boiling it because it does thicken on cooling. So now I'm going to add my salt. If you aren't sure about this, then just take a little bit out of the pot and pop it in a bowl and just put the tiniest little bit of salt on there and mix it in and see what you think of the flavour. It really does lift it quite a lot. And if you only have table salt, then just add a pinch at a time, stir it and then taste it because table salt is a lot stronger than sea salt. So this is now ready to use straight away, or you can transfer it to a jar to store it in the fridge for around about 2 weeks. It will become thicker in the fridge. So when you go to use it, you might need to just zap it for a few seconds in the microwave just to loosen it up a little bit. It doesn't freeze well though. So if you liked this video, give it a like. And if you want to see more of these, then just hit the subscribe button.